Foss here. So we're going to do a quick non-public session with him, and so I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion, we enter non-public session per RSA 91A:3, Section 2A.
Second.
I'll take a roll call.
Yay, Brown.
Yay, Eaton.
Yay, Anderson.
Yay, Danis.
Yay, Dumas.
Okay, we're gonna go offline because we'll be in non-public, and we will be back. So let's back up, and we will go
Do you want to
to.
wait till we're on camera?
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
All right, we will back up, and we will approve manifests.
That's me.
That's you?
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the accounts payable manifest of November 6, 2017, and the payroll manifest of November 7th, 2017.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
I don't have the non-public minutes, so they're gonna have to look at them.
Yep. We got them.
Oops, I'm gonna step out to the restroom while we're signing that.
You going to the conference Wednesday,
The 15th.
15th?
Yeah.
There's a HMA board meeting. If you want to go, you can be our rep.
Is it during the conference?
Yeah. 1 PM.
Yeah,
I wouldn't,
listening.
the only thing of interest there is the legislative forecast.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to the
That's-
update one.
You
that-
probably get the same story. It's the same people, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't pull you out of a different session to do it.
Did your non-public have amendments?
We haven't gotten to minutes yet, Don.
Well, I was just expecting.
Yeah, she asked if there was any amendments
Oh.
to it.
I didn't have any. Excuse me. There you go, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, someone want to make a motion on minutes?
I move we approve the minutes of 10/23/07 as amended.
Second.
Oh, discussion. I've got one more, just one more edit, Don.
Yes.
It's on line 54.
Yep,
Talking about the Historical Society losing its designation.
yep.
Chris, my recollection is that it was just on the national register, not the state.
Correct.
And so I just think we should insert that word national.
National?
Yeah, just to make it clearer. Okay. All right, all in favor of Charlie's motion to approve?
Aye.
Aye.
Was there a second?
Yep.
Thanks.
Tyler. Take a motion on the non-public?
So move.
Seconding.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, boards and,
As written or amended, sorry.
As written.
reports from from committees and boards. Budget,
Meets on Thursday.
okay,
And last, I think it was, not last week before last, we met, and I might have covered this already, but basically Chris gave the third quarter update. And there wasn't a lot of questions, if I remember correctly, so.
okay. Planning?
We've got a conceptual in front of us on Wednesday for, looks like a housing development. Small one,
Okay,
but
where, do you?
White Grove Road. looks like.
Oh, okay, interesting,
Yeah, it looks like an interesting one.
oh, interesting. All right,
Honestly, I don't know. I talked a lot about it, I guess, at trick or treating. People are asking me, I got no idea what's going on. Get some sort of meeting together or.
still,
Time for another prodding, I think.
okay. All right, town administrator report.
Let's see, well, we got through the storm, you probably noticed. According to our utility companies, everybody's got their power back. Say what you will about the speed of the response, the communication from Eversource was impressive. Not so much from the co-op, we didn't have a whole lot of communication with them, but most of the trouble spots seemed to be Eversource, but there were plenty of both. But we still have road cleanup work to do. We have tree work to do. We got our gravel roads need cleaning, and you can't grade the leaves and the rubble into the gravel road. So we're still not done. The power companies are done pretty much, but
Yeah.
There's
we're
still
not.
some Fairpoint and Comcast lines down.
Yeah,
But the cable's working, but the lines are still down.
lines are laying on the ground.
Yeah, it wasn't working
Truck
today.
from Virginia Power was on my road the other night,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wednesday.
Yeah,
Just before all that happened, we had a really successful series of Halloween events. The library and here and the school all did them all together, and that all went really well. I told you last time we cracked one of our cruisers. We're down a cruiser, and you heard Gunner mention a non-public. We got another one that's acting up. It's a
yes,
relatively minor thing, but we are without two at the moment. With our solar contract put to bed, revision is doing things like structural evaluation of this building, which I've heard secondhand, it has come out okay. I haven't heard from them directly, but it sounds like we're good to go here. They've evaluated, they were up climbing on the roof and climbing in the rafters last week, and so we're on track there.
Can I ask you a question about
Yep.
that? I remember at town meeting, a lot of people were concerned that the stick work up there, the rafters were not, they were barely sturdy enough to hold the snow load, not counting the weight of any paneling or an aluminum framing and all that stuff. But is that really the case, or is it?
Yeah, that's their engineers have evaluated that, and when I see something from them formally, I'll know for sure, but that's what they're checking for. They're not gonna put their system on anything that's not gonna hold
Yeah.
it, so. But that's what they were inspecting last week, is that question specifically. We don't have great drawings of this building, we gave them what we had, but they were up in it, so. A fair question. Anybody, you're going to the NHMA conference next week, anybody else that
15th.
wanted to go or didn't get an opportunity to go? It's next Wednesday and Thursday, 15 and 16, as long as y'all had a crack at it. Staff is going in a few different spots. I think we usually go for a day max, it's not worth going for both days, but we'll be around. Veterans Day is this Friday, the recycling center will be closed. Town offices will be closed.
Okay.
Dump closed.
Yep. And I think that is it. We've got obviously other things going on that you'll hear from me about that have been consuming most of my time. Otherwise, in the agenda.
All right. Anybody have any questions for Chris?
Nope.
Sorry, 2 annual review of merit changes there, which we also touched on in non-public, and your mail is essentially your latest copy of Town and City Magazine.
So we just have to sign these?
Just initial over on the right-hand side,
Oh,
would be
okay.
fine.
You said there were just 2?
Yep.
Donna, the only thing I wanted to mention to the other board members was that Charlie's gonna be on the 300th committee instead of me.
Okay.
I'm just too swamped to try to keep that on as well. Charlie had expressed interest and is willing to do it, so he'll be on that from this point on.
Congratulations, Charlie.
Thank you.
All right. You guys want one of these? Charlie, do you want one?
No, thank you.
Tyler? Okey dokey. We're good with Chris, all right. Tax rate setting. Take us through it, Chris.
Okay, you got from me on Friday the bulk of the background information. DRA process brings us to a tax rate of 21.56 per 1,000 of assessed valuation. Yep, as we've talked about a couple times, you've got 2 decisions to make. One is setting the level of overlay that we set aside for possible abatements next year. And second is, do you want to use any of the fund balance to reduce the tax rate? Nothing's really, I gave you a couple new sheets today around the decision about using fund balance, and I'll just whiz through those in a moment. Let me start with overlay. Are you comfortable with what that is, what we're doing, and the recommended amount of 30,000 set aside? If we're good with that, we can just whiz through
I'm good
that.
with that. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Yeah, just explain it to me again.
Okay, so we
just wanna make sure I understand it.
Yeah, we tax, based on our assessed value as of April 1st of this year. So that number's kind of locked in. Throughout the year, the Board of Assessors is making adjustments to assessments, usually in response to abatement requests. Or, you know, sometimes they grant them, sometimes they don't, and they go to court, or they go to the Bureau of Tax and Land Appeals. Those processes take a long time, and they, you know, we don't know today what we're gonna have to give back in the form of refunds for abatements. If if there's a significant change in a property's assessment, we owe the property owner a refund for the years that we've, that we're contested, so to speak. So we try to set aside a little bit of money to pay for that. Otherwise, it just comes out of the fund balance. So we're basically adding that amount to what we have to tax. It isn't really significant. We have to give DRA a number. In our case, we don't have in relation to our overall tax base, we don't have a lot of abatements in dollars, so this is not gonna move the number a great deal one way or the other. But we do have to set aside something. In a reval year, we've typically done more because that prompts more abatement requests and more contention about assessments. But with what we have, what we know about, what we have in courts right now, you know, if the town ends up owing rebates on all of them, I think 30,000 would probably almost cover it. It's kind of a guess, but if we knew we had, say, a big industrial taxpayer that had a big multi-million-dollar abatement case pending, we'd have to think more seriously about it. And this line is really there for towns with, you know, more complex tax bases than ours, the more contentious ones. I think that's, you know, we do something, but as a percentage of our tax bill and our tax base, it's not really a big deal. So we think this is plenty, and it ends up getting moved around in the tax rate setting process. It actually is where they catch some of the rounding stuff, so it's never a round number. It's never gonna come back at 30,000, it'd probably be lower than that, but we were at 40 coming out of the reval year, and we've been able to pull it back. Just, it's a way to keep a few pennies off the tax rate.
Okay, so is everybody cool with 30,000?
Yeah.
Okay, that one was easy.
Okay. I gave you a whole bunch of math about some things that are unique to Nottingham this year that relate to the warrant articles that we passed in March around USA Springs. It makes some of this kind of hard to follow, and it's taken us some time to figure out how to chase it all. In short, if I can say it in short, DRA looks at our town meeting votes to, that were contingent upon USA Springs. If, we had one big one, if USA Springs sells, take 380 from the fund balance and 100,000 from the conservation fund and pay down debt. You know, that was the vote that town meeting took. So there's $480,000 there that the town has said, if X happens, then spend Y.
Yeah.
There was another one that said, another vote at town meeting that said, if the town takes the property, set aside this money for this purpose, which was 50,000. There was another one, if the property is bought back through bank, or was purchased through the bankruptcy process, take 100,000 and put it in an account for legal and other protective stuff. So all of those things could have happened, and we went to town meeting and said, here are the scenarios, and give us approval to do these things. DRA looks at those as appropriations. So there's an appropriation for 480, there's an appropriation for 100, there's an appropriation for 50.
Simultaneously?
Yes, they, in their world, there was a vote to say that gave you the okay to do it.
So in their eyes, that full, the 480 and the 100 and the 50 was all appropriated,
Right.
But never spent.
but never spent.
Right, so in the setting of the tax rate, actually that 480 for debt repayment, it shows up as an appropriation, but it also shows up as a revenue in a transfer. So that doesn't affect the tax rate at all. We're not taxing extra for those things. It does screw up our fund balance calculations, and that's where I gave you a whole bunch of math. So we're not gonna tax people, for the most part, on those votes. Those things aren't gonna happen. We're not gonna tax because of them. There is one piece of 100,000 that shows up as revenue from the conservation fund that really isn't there. We're not really taking revenue into the general fund that we
Right.
could have. So we are, in a sense, artificially raising our stated revenues by 100 grand. So that, in the final analysis, is you taking 100,000 out of fund balance and using it to pay down taxes. It's not, in the grand scheme of things, not gonna hurt us or help us a great deal. There are other things that move by almost that much. You know, our actual revenues, we don't know our actual revenues yet. We have to finish the year before we know that. So we're guessing in September what our actual revenues are gonna be. And we can be off by 50 grand there too. So it matters, but it's not outside the realm of usual fluctuations in these things. So I give you that in terms of full disclosure and to say this is what you really ought to think about as your fund balance. Don't think about that 480 not being in your fund balance. That's what DRA would show you, but
Right.
it's really there, and you know that it's never going to sell through the bankruptcy, that we have closed that possibility out, so that appropriation is never going to happen. But rather than unwind everything with DRA, which takes votes and letters and director approval and all that stuff, we've just repackaged it for you to say, the money's really there.
Yep.
And you can make a decision about fund balance based on it really being
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
DRA is comfortable with either way. We don't have time to screw around waiting for them to approve whatever we were to unwind from that thing, so here we are. I don't know if that helped or hurt, but
So the decision that needs to be made,
is, do you want to take anything out of the fund balance, to pay down this year's taxes, to make this year's tax rate lower?
Looking at the town doesn't look bad, the school is appalling. I feel we got plenty of money, we got more money than we've had in fund balance for years. We gotta take at least 400,000 to level that out. People are gonna take a pretty hard hit if that doesn't get used. That's my thought, and I know. Chris and I didn't necessarily agree on that, we've talked about it a couple of times, but
You want me to just tell you real quick what I gave you tonight? Just so you know what you're looking, and you don't have to pay attention to it if you don't want to. Two things, that one is the one that has the net tax effort at the top. That's just trying to show you in dollar terms where this is coming from and to try and take a look at next year. The way we're trending, the net tax effort is the what do you spend versus minus what do you take in. That's what we have to tax. You know, that's really what drives the tax rate. Over the last 4 years, the town tax burden has gone up on average about 0.3%. The local school tax burden has gone up on average about 4.2%. The state education tax has gone down by about 0.5%, 0.6%, and the county's gone up by about 2.3% over the last 4 years. If you layer that trend onto what we have now to next year, let's say we keep doing what we're doing next year, we're gonna have to come up with another about 375,000 just for the normal course of business.
that's where he and I disagree. I don't see that happening, and I haven't seen it happen in the past. That if we spend 400 or 375, I also use that number with Chris. We're not gonna have to use that same amount next year to keep that trend.
why don't you think we'd have to do that, given the way that, like,
Just watching this go so many times in the last 20 years, you know, the tax rate setting, we've used what we thought would help keep it a lot calmer. It would, you know, ease up the additional tax increase. And I really don't recall ever seeing it come back that came up with that same amount again the next year to keep the tax rate level. This won't keep it level either, but it takes the peak and next year's gonna be a big peak. It'll take that out.
but the school budget, the
Yeah.
school has gone up a lot.
Yeah.
So if they did that again next year, then we'd be in the same situation.
True.
if they spend exactly if they net exactly the same amount next year as they did this year,
Yeah,
you will have to spend again next year whatever you spent this year to keep the tax rate flat.
right, right.
And that also, the other thing that falls into place there that gets overlooked is the revenues. You said earlier, you know, they're hard to track sometimes, not getting a good idea until this time of year what the actual revenues are.
Yeah.
And they've been all over the place for years, up and down, and so.
Some of my thinking is a couple of things. One, we're kind of, right now, we're in the middle of what, you know, DRA recommends. For a while there, I remember we were kind of dangerously low, I would say, that if something, you know, something catastrophic happened. My other concern is when we put this forward where we reduce, if we were to apply, you know, 300 or 4,000, is it tends to set the tax rate artificially low. So, you know, the tax rate doesn't go up, and people think, oh, well, we're spending money, we're doing all this stuff, and look at our tax rates are you know, staying low, that's great.
Yeah,
And not knowing that there's been, you know, some kind of surplus, so they come to, you know, the school election or the town meeting, the budget process, and they're like, yeah, we'll go for that, because,
yeah,
you know, it's not, you know, it's kind of artificially low. My other concern is, you know, we know we've got a couple of roads that are coming up and probably needing to get addressed, needing to get onto the CIP sooner. We may want to tap into this fund balance at some point in time to offset the tax rate during that time, in which, at least that way, we're improving the infrastructure, but we're helping improve that infrastructure and maintain, you know, apply some of that balance towards the road, so it's not, like, just as an example, 200,000, it's maybe 100,000, or maybe it's zeroed out. You know, we were able to do that on a couple of things recently. So I lean towards where what I would consider, you know, in a good place for the town, that if there were some, you know, emergencies and that we had to tap into this, we have that, or we can help address some of the infrastructure needs. So I tend to lean towards not applying it, and, you know, we could re-look at before this next town meeting, look at, like, our exemptions and where we are for elderly exemptions and stuff like that, and look at that to offset, to help some of, the elderly that live in town. But, so that was kind of my thinking in looking at this.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the other reality is, right, is that regardless of what the school budget is, voters approved it, right? And so it's what people want, they want to spend that money. But I am, sensitive to what the tax rate, how it impacts, particularly older people in town. And so I think your idea of looking at the exemptions and seeing, how
If
much
there's something we
leeway
can do
we have
there.
with those, I think that would be a good idea.
We're still gonna have $1.5 million in there if we take 400 out. 375, and we're still gonna have a pretty good charge of fund balance. I think Chris did a percentage there somewhere, I'm not sure. Anyway, that's
Yeah,
how that's the way I feel.
you'd be we're in the 12% range now. 400,000 would bring you down to about 10%.
Yeah,
And the range is like 8 to 17.
it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
All right, Tony
4 or
and Tyler, you
5%
guys need to weigh in here.
What's happened with previous boards when this has come up before? I mean,
Well, the last time it came up was when Mary and Mark and I were on the board, and we felt that within that range, we were too low. And so that, you know, we wanted to make sure that we started to bring that back up and get us into the middle of the range.
That fund balance. So you opted not to spend the money
Correct.
to raise
Yeah.
the percentage?
Yep.
Okay. And what was the circumstance that made you consider paying down with the fund balance? What year was that?
2 years ago, no, you've been on the board, so it was probably 2014, maybe?
I don't recall, I was in the 14 rate setting.
I think it was the first year.
I don't recall.
Maybe it was right before you came then.
I don't recall the board ever really getting close to doing it.
No, we didn't get close to doing it.
Some
We
communities,
understood
Right,
it
I
was
just-
an
have anything,
option.
they use it all
We were
every year.
focused on the fact that, you know, we were focused on that range and the fact that we
Sell
were,
that property
we were
too.
low,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. So it basically boils down to, do we want to spend the money to reduce the tax rate, or hold on to the money and let the tax rate float, despite the increase in the school budget? Right?
Yep.
Is that what it
Yep.
boils down to?
Yep.
Yeah, you're just doing this year.
Right, just this year, yeah. And
It's also setting a precedent, though.
it is setting a precedent. And like, if we buy it down this year, you know, so the thing that I'm not clear on is what happens next year? Would this line result in a higher spike next year? Do we have to keep, is it like, you know, paying off the mafia, like they always want more every time it comes around? You know what I mean?
Even
Would
if
that
the
be
s-
the precedent?
Even if the school budget stayed flat next year, we would still have to cover some of it just to keep the rate even with this year,
Right.
right?
But are we beholden to keep, I mean, obviously, we want to keep the rates as flat as possible so that people aren't burdened, but, you know, governance costs money, you know, services cost money, and inflation, it's always, everything always goes up, so.
What,
how-
do we know what the fund balance, I mean, does any of that get, what happens to the school budget if they don't use it all? I'm trying to remember.
If, the town nor the school really have a lot of latitude to overspend their budget.
Overspend,
So, you know, there's, the fund balance, it's hard for the fund balance to shrink without a conscious decision by somebody to make it so, whether it be the board right now or a town meeting. The school surplus, which it runs pretty much every year, the school board at that point does a couple things. If the school district meeting voted to take money from the surplus to put it in their reserve funds, 6 months ago, they do that. There's one way that the school board can save a little bit of that surplus into an emergency fund, so the board votes whether or not they want to do that. And then anything else of surplus is left, comes back in and comes off the tax burden in that year. So there is no sizable comparable school reserve like this. They can have a very small reserve, but.
They sometimes make additional purchases
Yeah, at the end of the year, I
at the
know.
end of the year.
Yeah, that's coming off of what would be a surplus.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
So there's no, the net effect of all the school stuff pretty much gets boiled out before we get to this point. This is the net result of their budget surplus. That's taken into account. It's, what did they appropriate? What did they have from a surplus for last year? And that's the resulting tax burden.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
probably more complex than that, but that's the gist of it. They're at a different point in their fiscal year than we are, so they,
yeah.
Even if we use 375, we could get down that road for like 4 years and still not go down to nothing.
If we did 375, what would it bring the rate down to?
Let me see. That's all right.
3.03 or something.
I didn't do 375, I did,
$20.95, $20.95 mill rate.
damn.
From what? 21?
From, well,
You should,
What, if you do nothing?
This spreadsheet, in the
2156.
computer, I can put a number in there and it'll tell me.
56.
Where it is now, where it would be,
Where's the,
Yeah, you
That's-
can't
that's the
realistically
rate.
spend your entire fund balance. We need
Would
that
be-
to
it
operate
goes
in
from-
between tax
Right,
bills. So
right.
it's not a,
Right.
you don't have 1.9
2156
million
on a 2091.
in savings. We, unless you want to borrow money every year.
I just think we know we've got a couple of challenging roads coming up, and we could help offset that infrastructure needs. That's kind of where. So, you're, either way, you're, the townspeople are benefiting. It's just, from my
Right.
perspective, they're benefiting and we're improving the town.
Tyler?
I'll, kinda still running this through my head, but I mean, I look at it, I understand what Charlene's saying, but then I say, I hear people out there saying about their roads, and if they're not their roads, then, this may upset them to say, oh, we're gonna do this road or that road, and everybody, we know what roads that people are asking us about it, and there's probably a lot more, really, but when I look at the school thing, I think they're gonna spend whatever money they're gonna have, they're gonna try their hardest to spend as much as they can.
actually, my time on the budget committee, I saw that the school was generally turning in 300,000 to 500,000 a year.
Yeah, they've had some large
It used to be
surpluses.
7.
And they put
Yeah.
those warrant articles in to go to special reserve funds. That
Right.
comes out of that balance, and then what they don't use for that goes back to offset taxes.
Yeah.
Not like the towns just goes into that fund balance and it doesn't get used unless the board votes on it.
Plus, that,
That's a pretty big cushion we get there now.
the proposed
$1,900,000.
school budget got emailed out tonight, and one of the notes that Sue put in there is that they're concerned about how high the increase is, and they're gonna readdress their priorities and try to take that down. But clearly, they don't want the impact to be as high as it looks right now.
Yeah, but so that's for next year.
Yeah, it's like 91 cents a thousand now, isn't it? Just the school side.
Yeah, the first draft of the budget, the expense budget came in another 750 on top,
Yeah,
replicating this year's increase, essentially. I don't know what their revenue plan
Yeah.
is, but,
the first drafts are always look scarier than
yeah.
what the final one ends up being. So, I mean, it may be a little early to panic.
That's right, I had a notebook with all my doodles in it, and I forgot to bring it.
But then, I wonder, are we actively trying to sell the property on Route 4? Is that gonna make a difference here in the future? I think we ought to get rid of it, myself, as quickly as possible.
So the question on the table is, do we use fund balance to offset the tax rate or not? Given all the facts that we have laid before us. We know where Charlie is. I think we know where Charlene is.
I'm on the fence.
Yeah, we have to make a decision tonight. We have to, because we've already delayed them getting
Yeah,
started
we gotta
on
get
the
this
tax
stuff
bills.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just having trouble visualizing the repercussions with either choice. And I can see both sides of it, There's potential uses for that money, like Charlene said, with some of the roads that we can address. We don't have to worry about the other half of Lakeview, because we've got that squared away, and that puts us in a position to move forward on other roads that are areas of concern. But then again, on the flip side, the school is gonna be an increase one way or the other. That's gonna hit folks on fixed budgets, more than they're gonna like. So there's benefit to spending some fund balance to take that down and ease that hit, so.
On the, when Charlene talked about the for lack of a better word, discounts for elderly,
Exemptions.
exemptions, thank you. There's actually 3 categories of that, right?
Yes.
From what I recall, yeah. I mean, so we could look at all 3, right? Yeah. I forgot what the other 2 were.
Blind and veterans.
Because there's a,
Yeah, I thought veteran was one.
we can change the values in there in town meeting, you know, there's a 64 to 69, 69 to 74, and a 74 to 80, or whatever the.
Yeah,
And you can change what the household income is. Single, or that's how they, I mean, just because somebody's that old doesn't mean they get the exemption. You have to fall in under the
so we could look,
voted stat.
we could look at that, we could put forward a warrant article to put before town meeting, right?
Yes.
Yeah. As a board, we can do
For
that,
those,
yeah,
yeah.
to look at the 3
We
categories.
did one my last year as the administrator, and when it came right down to the end, I was a little mixed, had mixed feelings about it, although I had initiated it and
Why did you have
discussed
those
it with the
feelings?
board. I don't know, it's just, it's a tough thing to do. 'Cause I know so many people in this town that fall into those categories and stuff, but I didn't want to make it too high. I forget what we did. We jacked up all the percentages a little bit, you know,
Yeah,
the salary range for married, single and married, and
Yeah.
then you can't have over X number of dollars in assets, like retirement funds. If you have too many retirement funds, you can't get the,
yeah.
and,
I think I
I
was
think
here.
it is a big back, I forget how many years back it was, and NHMA sent out one of their reports and say Nottingham is one of the top 20 most generous towns in the state when it came to elderly exemptions and that, because there's elderly, there's blind, there's about 5 of them that you can change the numbers. The state statutes has them down to a minimum, like $30,000. But, the town had jacked them up over the years. But, anyway, I don't know. That is another way, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look at that hard again this year before I could support
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I said, after initiating it myself, then I had second thoughts when it came down to the numbers.
I think that was, because I was here last year, when
Yeah,
you were town
yeah.
administrator, so I was part of that.
We've identified other ways you could use the, you know, you could use the fund balance to reduce taxes as well. You could decide to do it now. You could also, town meeting could also use that money to offset other expenses, to pay down debt, to,
So we could say, we're gonna take it out of the fund balance.
yeah, that's town meeting's money. They can do with it what they wish, and they can, you know, they could buy what some of the capital purchases that we have in mind could come out of the fund balance. You can take the fund balance and turn it into tax relief in lots of different ways. None of them are this fast,
Yeah,
but
but it's giving more
It's-
control to the voters to decide,
that's another way to look at it, is it's a town meeting decision.
yeah.
It's their money, it's their costs, you know, you can obviously recommend things to them, but.
Yeah. All right, Tony and Tyler. If we have to sit here till midnight before we get decisions, we'll sit here till midnight. I won't be happy, but we'll do it.
And I'll make a motion that we use $375,000 from the fund balance to lower the tax rate.
I'll second it for purposes of discussion.
So how do we settle on a particular number? I mean, what's the? We just,
Well, depending on, the higher the number, the lower the tax rate is. The smaller the number, the higher the tax rate is. I mean, it's,
so if we do 375, why not just do the full 400,000?
well, that too, I mean, well, yeah. That was my first thought, but, you know, I was actually
That-
open
that's
to
not a
reducing it some.
You could, I mean, if DRA approves it, you could use 750,000. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd put that in there because it was the highest number I'd heard from any of you.
Okay,
There's, you're close to unlimited, I mean, you can't spend more than you have, but you could go very high if you put your mind to it. DRA might approve it.
I downloaded this on my computer at home, you just add that number into that balance there, and it tells you how much it's gonna change the rate. Pretty nice to use when you get the spreadsheet on your computer.
So I'm leaning with Charlene, because I think it's I think it's like a Band-Aid fix, right? And it's not gonna, we're gonna be in the same position next year, and the year after, and the year after. I really like the idea of looking at the exemptions, and I really like the idea of giving town meeting the power to decide if something's gonna come out of the fund balance. So I'm leaning with Charlene.
Something other than tax rate setting. We're talking about setting the tax rate now. You don't wanna give town meeting the opportunity to vote on what you're gonna take out of fund balance.
Well, we talked about, they could, at town meeting, they could say, we need a new truck, we wanna take it out of fund balance, right? Isn't that what you just said?
Yep,
Yeah,
we can do anything.
yeah.
And if the town doesn't vote to spend that money on anything, then the tax rates float up. Right?
No, if it was, you would have already done this, say.
Yeah.
And then something comes up at on the floor at
okay.
town meeting, that would take more money out of fund balance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, when you come down to it, the bottom line is, it's town meeting in the deliberative session that decides what the tax rate is,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Or at the very least, it's the 50 to 75 people who show up there that decide that.
Yeah, that's what's,
And that's the other thing that's got me, I mean, if we decided to spend this money tonight to, to reduce the tax rates, there's a tangible benefit to all the taxpayers in town that we can demonstrate as soon as we voted for it. Or like Charlene said, if we applied it to road work, that's another tangible benefit.
Do we want to vote, since we have a motion on the table?
Is there any more discussion, I guess? is
Well,
the
I
question.
guess, does anybody else
Is there
have
any more
anything?
discussion?
Is there anybody else have anything else they wanna explore or discuss?
My concern too is that we're not, like, I'm a veteran. I don't get the veteran, whatever for taxes,
Right,
which is fine.
because of income.
Yeah. No, just because I wasn't the right time or something like, I don't know.
Oh.
But that doesn't matter. I'm just worried about, you have exemptions and you're still gonna have people that won't qualify for some reason or another. Whether, like Charlie just said, it doesn't matter if they're 82 years old, it still could be something. Where I look at, the one solution gives everybody what they want. Everybody wants to keep them down as low as they can. And until, I guess, we start doing tremendous things with the infrastructure in the town. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't see anybody that's really, we got people with dirt roads, begging to have them paved, and other people saying, oh, we don't need to pave them, and I just look at it as they're gonna be, if they don't get their roads paved or whatever they want and where they live, they're gonna say, well, why didn't I get the, an increase or a decrease? I mean, I don't get it. I mean,
I've been thinking about the road thing too, say possibly using some of this, but I think if we start increasing some of these, rebuild the line from the highway department annually, we're gonna get those done. I mean, that's what Johnny did for a number of years, and the roads are in great shape right now, other than the gravel roads, obviously. But that's something we can budget for in the regular operating budget. $100,000 extra a year, something like that, and still maintain a reasonable fund balance. We just put it in our regular operating budget. I don't know. There's all kinds of scenarios.
Yeah,
That's-
yeah.
Well, let's ask the question from the other direction. Is there any reason do we have any compelling reason to not spend this money to reduce taxes?
Well,
Because we've discussed the benefits, are there any consequences? Any
Some big
unintended-
legal thing was coming down the aisle that we
You have
knew
to do it
about.
again
That would
next
be
year.
one reason, but
To maintain the same tax
actually,
rate.
no. 'Cause
Right.
it's
We
been
can't do
going
that
up pretty
indefinitely.
regularly for the
I
last
think
number
the
of
other
years.
thing is if we were gonna vote, if Charlie's motion passes, we need to do our best and donest to tell the people that this is what has happened, to keep, so that when they get their tax bill, and I don't care if it's, we put together a letter and says, here's your tax bill, and guess what? This is, give them this information, and this is what we did to do it, so that people are aware, because otherwise, again, I think it falsely sets up that we're spending money, the town is spending money, but we're maintaining this low tax rate. Because a lot of people don't know that we do this, and so I think we need to be really, really clear and communicate that out, you know, so that folks know.
You can take this spreadsheet right there and say, well, we used X number of dollars to offset the taxes. If we hadn't done that, this is what the tax rate would have been. As opposed to what it ends up with, whatever we end up with.
okay, we ready to vote? So the motion on the table and seconded was to take 375,000 from the fund balance to offset the current year's tax rate. So, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 3-2.
Thank you.
All right. There you have it, Chris.
Okay.
But I do think at some point when we're getting around to talking about warrant articles, we should take a look at what the exemptions look like. Let's revisit those. They may be fine where they are, but it's always worth a discussion. Alrighty then. That covers it, right, Chris?
Talk about the budget.
Oh, damn, yeah, forgot about that.
Well, I do want to just touch on, I do think that we should somehow get this communicated clearly to the townspeople.
I agree.
That there was money that was taking out of the fund balance to offset the taxes. Here's what the DRA recommendation was and the comparison of the years, the data that Chris presented to us, so that folks are aware of that and that they see where,
And there's no guarantees what's gonna happen next year,
right,
right?
right.
The number of communities that use it all, they don't keep any fund balance at all, they just use it all.
I think
Don't have to
that's
go
That's a
through this
fiscally
routine.
irresponsible myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see a year from now what any unspent funds that we have at the end of that budget year to compare with what we, you know what I mean? Say we have 400,000 left over at the end of that budget year. Would it have made a difference then to pay
Oh,
this
I see
money?
what
You
you're
know what I
saying.
mean?
We are usually pretty close.
Well, we had a big surplus last year. This year's not gonna be.
gonna be
actually,
tight,
We're gonna be
yeah.
tight this year.
Yeah.
We can't have a deficit, so we're always gonna have some kind of surplus.
Yeah,
And revenue is the wild card that we
Yeah.
don't know
yeah.
until it's done.
Yeah.
Okay. So, has anybody looked through this? I don't know that
I
anybody.
haven't had.
I haven't either. So what's our timeline on this budget, Chris?
Oh, well, we gotta go to the budget committee. Let me call up my calendar here. It's all pretty squishy until January.
Yep.
We will be back to the budget committee with a first draft. Not for a while yet.
Okay,
December 7th.
okay.
Really?
Yeah.
We'll have it.
We've got a gap because of Thanksgiving and the school is up.
School went
this
first
week
this year.
with their proposed budget.
Yeah, so we wanted to get this to you in time to swallow some of it tonight, talk about it on the 20th.
Yep.
Your next meeting, if you have, you know, serious concerns. And so we have basically have two meetings between now and two of your meetings between now and when we go to the budget committee with our first draft. And there's plenty of time for revision thereafter. So,
Okay.
I would look at tonight as just a way to say, this is the big picture, these are the big questions that we have, these are the big things that we're thinking about. And just kind of let you know where we sit today, and you can give me your feedback on the big picture stuff. This is a little bit more drafty than some first drafts. You know, we are not down into the weeds on every line item yet.
Okay.
But if you're comfortable with that level of run-through, we still have a couple more bites at it. And if you want to talk to department heads, we can set that up too.
What I would like is, you know, if you can give us the highlights tonight,
Yep.
and then give everybody a chance to take a look at it, and then
Okay.
come back with questions and stuff on the 20th. That sound all right to everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think, you know, just for me, as far as the highlights, kind of anything that is standing out or, you know, making you a bit concerned.
Okay. Okay, so, I mean, if you go right to the last page, you see we're, as we sit today, this draft looks like a 3% increase, or 112,000 over last year. There's, and then this is only part of the part of the picture. Obviously, there's a revenue piece that we never really know anything about.
Right.
And then there's all the warrant articles that come after it that also spend money, and you can move things back and forth between them. So, I'll just run you through what we have here. We'll start with that.
You can run through what, the warrant articles?
No, the operating budget.
Okay.
The executive stuff's all pretty straightforward. No big plans for changes there. The town clerk numbers, they pretty much come straight from Sandy. She's got a pay increase request in there. And other than that, it's all pretty much, you know, no change in services and anything on our radar there. Elections, starting on line 33, we have 3 elections next year. We have town meeting, we have a September state primary and November general election, so those are gonna jump across the board from 2017, where all we had was town meeting.
Yep.
Those are always kind of a guess, but we'll look at 2015 and 2013 to try and get a sense of those.
Yep.
I'm sorry, 2014. 2014 is the best indicator for 2018.
Right.
Because there's no presidential, so we'll drill down some more on that. FA, starting in the 40s, is an amalgamation of bookkeeping and tax collection. One outlier is every 3 years we have to have an audit of our retirement liabilities. That's GASB 45, I think it's called. And we're up for that this year. Assessing, nothing out of the ordinary. Line 81, this is big dollar stuff relatively here. Line 81 is health insurance. I told you last time we were together that our premium rates are going down.
Yeah.
We're modeling the same number of people. We know almost who almost all of them are, and we budget based on, okay, this person's on a family plan, this person's on a individual plan. So we expect that's going to go down with the same number of heads on the program next year as this year. We have the FICA and the Medicare are pegged to payroll. The retirement for police and fire are both going to be, our contribution rates are going to be stable for next year. They go up every couple of years. Typically, this is a year where we know what the number is going to be all year, so we peg that to police and fire payroll.
Yeah.
That has been a big jumper in the past. I'm sorry, back up to 77. I've shaved a little bit out of legal. It's one of those things you never know what it's going to do, but USA Springs should be getting in the rearview mirror on us. some of the kind of unknown, this is one of the kind of unknown pieces, line 93, in converting our full-time building inspector, code enforcement officer, staff support to the planning board position to part-time employees. We know that we need to come up with some kind of staff support for the, professional staff support for the technical side of the planning board work. We don't have anybody in that role now. I expect that number to get a little bit more certain as we get closer to the end of the budget process, but we got to plug something in there, either for a part-time hourly person or a contract something. So that's a bit of an unknown at this point. Further down that page, line 123, this is one of the projects we have in mind. Security in the town clerk's office. We need, this rises to the level of need, I think, beyond want. We need to secure the staff that work in the town clerk's office a little bit better. You know, we have a counter with a swinging door on it now that, you know, actually the Department of Labor flagged us on it a couple of years ago and said, you really need to do something about this. And folks working in there at the time said, we kind of like the small town feel that we have. A lot of towns are going through this. Our staff that work in there are seeing a lot of their peers go through these upgrades. So what we have noodled out right now is a design of basically a replacement counter with some security glass and a door to still hopefully keep it feel kind of open, but physically secure the space so that you can't come over the counter, can't come through the door.
Yeah.
We move a considerable amount of cash through there. We have individual people working at night in there routinely. We got to do better than we're doing.
I agree.
So I actually have Gary Anderson going to give me a ballpark number on a design that we have right now. So we'll come back with a better number on that. I'll show you the pictures when we get closer.
We had talked about cameras and auditable door locks.
Cameras are in. We are recording everything in the town clerk's office now, and your office, our office. That's all recorded and visible to me and the police department from our desks. Audio recording may be legally a little bit more tricky, but we have what we hope to be a deterrent, and obviously if we need it for an investigation, it's there for us. We are recording everything that goes on in the hall from a few different perspectives, the outside of the building. That was this year's upgrades, security-wise.
Chris, what about, we had also talked about in the past to maybe in the future switch from key punch entry instead of...
Yeah, and I may come back with that here. The front door is really hard. I've not found anybody that said that they can do that yet with a combination of the handicap button and it's too much for one door to do. I would like to get to some kind of keyless something for town clerk's office, for our office, maybe for the conference rooms, the building inspector's office. Our key control is horrendous. It's been the same keys forever.
Right.
It's we could keep changing the locks, and we're never going to keep up with it. We need to move beyond that. So I may come back to you with something on 4 or 5 doors there. The front door is going to be a lot harder. It'd be great to have a numeric thing that we could, hey, you're renting the building, here's your code for the day.
Right.
That would be the ideal. I just haven't found anybody that could do it with that handicap door on. So
Right.
it's still on the radar, but I haven't figured that one out yet. Okay. Let's see, what else is out of the ordinary here? Fuel's gonna go up a little bit. I gotta tighten that section up a little bit, but we're gonna be underspent this year probably, so I think we might be budget-wise probably okay to leave it in the neighborhood we're in. But I'm gonna go back and look at the usage and the rates and things. I think we're gonna be close. Another thing that's plugged in here, kind of squishy, is cemetery repairs. We've identified a number of wants and needs around our cemeteries. We're waiting on some pricing for first fence repair, maybe a little bit of road work and some signage down the road. We're trying to
The old
plug
south
that.
side needs some road work big time up there.
Yeah, we gotta
My
clear some
pickup
brush
truck.
before we can get into one spot, and gotta rent equipment, because our equipment can't do it.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we've been talking about this for years, and, so we're gonna try and put some numbers on it.
Yeah, all our equipment's too big to go up there, so
Yeah.
I was thinking of Champion to do it.
Oh, maybe, yeah, maybe that is a good place to look. So we'll be back with more on that. Our workers' comp rates came in good. Property and liability insurance, you entered into a rate cap agreement with Primex earlier this year. We don't know if this is the max number. We won't know, how it's really gonna finish for a while yet, but, that's all generally good news. In the police department, this is, this reflects us being fully staffed there. We've not been that way for some time. We've got a cruiser replacement, as it has become the norm. There'll be an Explorer, to replace an Explorer. We've got a trade-in number already, so that number's pretty hard. The upfit number's a little bit squishier. Sometimes that gets, depending on what you can pull out of the old cruiser and put in the new one, that number tends to wiggle around a little bit, but we've got pretty solid numbers there. No staffing changes otherwise there. Fire and rescue, a host of minor-ish changes. We've been doing more training, which I think is a good use of money, and we're gonna continue to try and promote that and make sure the money's available for it. You'll see later, we're gonna have a standalone warrant article for breathing apparatus replacement. That's, CIP committee's talking about that right now. That's kind of a must-do item.
Right.
And some updates, and a lot of our forestry equipment is getting, I don't know how many years old, but it's aging out. That's kind of next on the small equipment list. That's on 213. Let's see, line 215 and 16, you see the impact of the full-time to part-time building inspector change there. One of them goes away, another one goes up quite a bit. The net is in our favor, though. Emergency management, nothing out of the ordinary. Highway, this gets even squishier. We have talked about a highway director, we've talked about a public works director. How we reflect those in a budget, we've not really figured out. We also talked about adding a heavy equipment operator as part of that transition, particularly if we end up with a public works director. So what this is built so far on reflecting all of the cost of a public works director and a new full-time heavy equipment operator in here.
It's all reflected in
It's all
here.
in there.
Okay.
That won't be what happens in the, given what's going on with that so far, but that's what we've modeled there. The rest of this is really me kind of guessing. We don't have a work plan beyond a capital improvement plan, and so much of our expenses in this department are responsive either to events or equipment problems that it's hard to know what to expect. But and then so that is admittedly a bit of a guessing game. It's mostly driven by what are we seeing in the past, and what should we realistically plan for in the future if we do the same work. And then the big outlier is line 262. In the CIP and the general consensus of what our needs are, we had planned on buying a 1-ton pickup truck with a plow in 2018. We have a pickup truck now. It's the one that you probably see running around town. It doesn't have its bed on it anymore. It's been replaced with
Flatbed.
cabinets. It's a flatbed essentially with cabinetry on it now, and it also acts as a plow. That's the go-to utility vehicle for the department for anything light duty. It's getting tired. It's too small to do the plowing that we do with it. The lake roads just destroy it. And we, you know, even in, for a week while we had a public works director, we realized that we were kind of light on that vehicle. John Fernald would drive his truck around. He's got a panel truck that he used to, it was essentially part of the town fleet. When the pickup truck was busy, or if something needed, you know, something needed to be fetched, it was John Fernald's truck that went and got it a lot of times. It had a town fuel tank on the back of it, and, you know, it was a town truck, which, you know, shouldn't have been the way, but that was the way. And so this is admittedly also kind of a plug where I can't speak that eloquently to how we would use it, but it has always been the consensus that was next, and I can see the need for it. So for first draft, that's in there. That is something that could stand alone as a warrant article. It could come out of the truck reserve, which isn't really flush right now. It's kind of in that middle range where it's kind of spendy for the operating budget, but it's kind of cheap for its own warrant article. So you can tackle that in January, but that's one of the big numbers. That's a big number when you look at the change for the year, is that one line item. So we'll be talking about that more.
Will we keep the other one too, though? I mean, just.
Yeah, I think we'll run that into the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Shim and seal coat, this is the overlay program. Ideally, we do, I mean, we pulled back this year and saved some of our money there because of the winter we had. But this is trying to keep pace, trying to, you know, keep up with the rising cost of asphalt, if there is one, and do about the same amount of mileage we did in 2016.
And that line hasn't changed that much year over year, though.
No,
Is
it
it-
creeps up by 1 or 2 points, which is basically an inflationary adjustment.
Yeah,
We need to do more than we do with that overlay, because we are behind, but not, probably not as far behind as a lot of towns, but we know that we're behind, and we have 6 years out, I think, we have in the CIP, taking a year off from other projects to spend another 200,000 on overlay to catch up.
so are we spending enough on it? Are we?
Well, if we're willing in the CIP context to take a year off from other projects to catch up, then yes, we are. We'll be on a good pace. If we don't do that, then we are not spending enough. Ideally, you wouldn't have to do that. You don't want to, you know, but from a reconstruction point of view, we're in pretty good shape.
Yep,
So
yep.
that,
Historically, he's backed off on that line. Things like this year, we had that engine job to do on the grader and
yeah,
Yeah.
the loader. That's where that extra money came from.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
That's not enough in his maintenance budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, you know, nobody's counting how many feet you do. It's an easy way to save money on the budget if you have to. If you get
Yeah.
nervous, then that's
Yeah,
what you do.
yeah.
There's probably a better way for us to do that. But we need the flexibility. You wouldn't want to pull this out and make it its own warrant article,
Right.
because then you'd lose the ability
To do anything.
to pay for the grader engine or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
We need the flexibility, so it needs to be in here.
Yeah.
But we need to, on average, do 5% more than we do in mileage, maybe, something like that, 10% more, something in that range. But we're in good shape. We don't, you know, we stand in a good spot, generally speaking. Gravel road, paving set aside, it's, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
we're
yeah.
in decent shape there.
Yep.
Okay, recycling center, ignoring anything around a public works position there. You know, our tonnage and our hauling and our disposal rates creep up a little bit. Some of that we're contracted with. Not a huge budget buster. We do need to expand our testing around the landfill to include PFOAs this year. DES came out and said this year or next, you gotta get that tested
Right.
for us, so we're gonna incur a little bit of cost there. Animal control, general assistance, all, they're small money, we don't really pay much attention to those. We are not very far along in the public service agency, process, it's kinda early. Switching that to the operating budget has been seamless this year.
Oh, right, yeah,
Recreation, the next draft you see is gonna be a little bit different in the payroll lines. We are in the process of, I'm not doing much of it. They're gonna reconfigure how they staff summer camp. The structure of summer camp's gonna change. The way they supervise the beach is gonna change. We weren't able to staff the beach with lifeguards on the weekends this year, which we budgeted for, hoping we could find the people. We weren't really successful in that. They're talking with the school about moving most of the summer camp operations over there. They got a nice new playground over there, and they got a facility that's built for kids. And so that will have some staffing impacts around camp, and how the operating budget and the rec revolving budget
right.
mesh together. That's still kind of up for grabs. It's, whatever you see in the next draft is not gonna be markedly different from this. It'll be less, if anything, I think, but, we're still hammering through that.
That's a
stuff.
great idea to look at moving it to the school.
Yeah. We're not there yet, but
Yeah.
it's under discussion.
Yeah,
And it would probably be the youngest kids would be there, and some of the older kids would still be here, depending on, programmatic things more than,
more bathrooms.
yeah. Yeah, we thought of that.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah. Library, we have a little bit more detail if you want it from the library, not a big change there. Everything else is uneventful. I think we've talked about this before, on line 350 and line 355, that bond for the renovation of this building has gone away, so that comes off the budget.
That's good.
And so our net up at this point is up 113.65 of that being, half of it being that 1-ton truck.
Okay.
So, that's our first go at it. Did you get a second, want me to
Yeah.
pause there for anything?
Anybody have any questions?
We don't see anything on, on the horizon around revenues, or, the legislature's not in session, so there's nothing brewing that we're aware of that will change
Yep.
dramatically on the revenue side. We are trending up on our motor vehicle registrations as we budgeted for. We, this year, anticipated, we're kind of getting closer to reality with our revenue budgets. That is coming to fruition, so those numbers keep going up. That's taxation of a different flavor.
Yeah. So the second sheet is just a initial pass on warrant articles, and there's nothing really new there.
Right. You'll see the fire breathing apparatus at 75 and the fire vehicles capital reserve at 25.
Yep,
That's what the chief is proposing, to keep that 100,000 in
flat, yep,
capital purchases flat.
yep.
CIP committee has talked about that, and I don't know if CIP is gonna come back and say that 25 is too low or not. Well, I don't, as the world sets up, we're gonna be looking for another truck in 2022, I think it is. Putting money in the reserve at the pace we are will not be enough for that truck, so
Okay.
that's one of the CIP questions. There's no dollar amount by the fire truck here, the last line on this. Fire department's gonna propose a replacement for engine 3 with another engine, bigger water tank on it, but essentially an engine that will be funded entirely out of existing capital reserve funds, so no tax impact there this year.
Are they gonna have to push back the replacement schedule for that in the CIP, since they delayed a year by not getting a Quint?
2 years, but
2 years, yeah.
What this engine sets up is a Quint in 2022 or 23 at fits the, you know, that it makes sense in a long-term plan sense. There won't be enough, engine or quint next truck, there won't be enough in the bank to pay for it. At this 100,000 a year pace that we're spending on highway equipment. We think with bonding, we can probably keep it flat at that 100,000 rate and replace the trucks when they need to be replaced. So, we think we can keep that impact constant and replace the trucks fast enough. That still works with today's dollars.
It's a good first pass,
Okay.
yeah. Anybody have any questions or comments?
The one thing, the invasive species, is that what we've been putting 4,000 into it? Now it's up to 10?
Yeah, it's been at 10.
No, it's been at 10, we've been spending 4 and saving 6, so it's building up. And we have 12 in it now, or something like
Yeah,
that?
what it used to be was 4,000 specifically for the Lake Coast program in
Yes.
Pawtuckaway, and we'd send the money to New Hampshire Lakes.
Right.
Now it's changed because we're still supporting that, but this fund is really, it's just invasive species, so if there was
Anything.
another issue in town, we could take care of that, or, you know, there is milfoil on Pawtuckaway now, and, you know, it's very well controlled by DES, but who knows if they're gonna continue to give us their time and resources free.
We have to look at the language in that warrant article. I think it has to be revised.
Why is that?
I forget exactly the way that was. That was one of my notes that I wrote, from the town meeting.
Coming out of town meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll dig up that email, because you sent them to me after the fact.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I forget exactly how it's worded, but, we have to go back and look at it.
What was the general gist of
It's,
the issue?
like,
That's what we've been doing
could
every
that
year
be used for
for
private
shim and
lakes?
seal coat.
And,
Oh, I remember.
Highway
that,
construction,
yeah.
reconstruction.
so, we need to look at the language.
Private
of
ponds.
Private ponds. like,
Yes, yes,
that has a
that's
law.
what that was used for.
Okay.
So every year,
We need to restrict
a
that
couple of years, he was
public.
jacking it up like 5% a year, so we
Water
could do a little
bodies.
bit more footage every year. But like, yeah, that's where that Lakeview came
All
out.
right. Any other topics?
Oh.
Good, full meeting. I'll take a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.